Imagine this: a galaxy ruled by arrogance, a council of ancient species, believing themselves untouchable, dictating the fate of trillions, and humanity, a mere afterthought in their grand designs, until now. It started as a warning. The Galactic Council issued an ultimatum. Humanity must disarm, surrender its military advancements, and submit to their rule. For the stability of the galaxy, they claimed. For peace. But peace was never their goal. It was control. You see, the Council had watched humanity's rise with unease. At first, they ignored us, dismissing us as another primitive race doomed to burn itself out. But we didn't. We climbed. We fought. We innovated. In just a few centuries, we leaped from a single planet to an interstellar force. Our technology rivaled civilizations millions of years older. Our will, unyielding. The Council could not allow it. When humanity refused to bow, they made an example of us. The skies over Earth darkened as war fleets emerged from hyperspace, blotting out the stars. The bombardment was swift, merciless. Millions perished in an instant. Cities crumbled into dust. And then, silence. The Council thought it was over, that humanity would break, that we would beg for mercy. But they had made a fatal mistake. They underestimated us. They forgot that we are a species forged in struggle, that every hardship, every war, every catastrophe only made us stronger. And now, with our homeworld scarred but unbroken, we stood at the edge of the abyss, and we chose vengeance. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. Humanity would not go quietly. The Council had declared war, and now we would answer. Our fleets, once hidden, emerged from the void. Weapons that defied the laws of physics ignited the darkness. Entire battle groups vanished in the first wave. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for dominance. But the true horror for the Council? Humanity was just getting started. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as their fleets burned. Humanity had struck back with a ferocity they never imagined. The opening salvos of our counterattack had not just repelled their forces. They had erased them. For eons, the Council had dictated the balance of power in the galaxy. They had tamed warlike species, crushed rebellious worlds, and imposed order through sheer technological superiority. But when they attacked Earth, they made one fatal assumption, that humanity was like every other race they had subdued. That we would cower, that we would break. They were wrong. The first wave of human retaliation came from the hidden fleet stationed in deep space black sites. Arsenals built in secret, beyond the Council's watchful eyes. Entire planetary defense stations, armed with experimental weaponry, had been waiting for this moment. And when the war began, we unleashed hell. Hypervelocity railguns, powered by magnetogravitic accelerators, turned warships into shrapnel before their shields could react. Planet-side defenses, once thought obsolete, struck back with precision-guided kinetic bombardments. Human-built AI warships, designed for rapid adaptation, learned Council fleet tactics in real time, exploiting weaknesses within minutes of engagement. The Council, for the first time in recorded history, was losing. But the true turning point came not in the cold void of space, but on the surface of a world the Council had already abandoned. The betrayal of the Rim worlds. Long before the war, humanity had been expanding into deep space, colonizing planets on the very edges of the Council's territory. We had terraformed barren wastelands, built cities on the frozen tundras of distant moons, and established outposts in systems no other species had dared to claim. We were explorers, pioneers, but to the Council, we were pests. So when the war began, they decided those frontier colonies were expendable. In a single coordinated attack, the Council bombed 17 human colonies out of existence. Millions of lives, scientists, farmers, children, wiped out in mere hours. Entire cities melted into slag, Their distress calls cut off mid-transmission, but not all were lost. On a desolate world called Voria 7, a colony of 2 million civilians was left to die. The Council fleet had disabled their escape vessels, deployed biological weapons into the atmosphere, and moved on, assuming that within days, the planet would be nothing but a graveyard. But they underestimated humanity's greatest strength. We do not abandon our own. When word reached the Terran High Command of what had happened, there was no debate, no hesitation. Every available warship was diverted. Every combat-ready soldier was deployed. The mission was clear. Voria 7 would not fall. And so, in the darkness of space, the single most daring rescue operation in human history began. Thousands of drop pods rained from the sky, carrying elite marine divisions clad in next-generation power armor. They hit the ground running, weapons raised, engaging Council, extermination squads that had remained behind to ensure no survivors. Orbital artillery, raining down from human battleships in low atmospheric lock, wiped out entire regiments of enemy forces within minutes. The civilians, sick and starving, thought they had been left to die. But when they saw their defenders emerging from the smoke, their shattered hope ignited into something far more dangerous. Righteous fury. Those who could fight, fought. Those who could help, helped. Engineers repaired downed ships under enemy fire. Medics, overwhelmed and outnumbered, worked tirelessly to keep the wounded alive. And in the end, against all odds, we won. Voria 7 did not fall. It rose. The rescue of the colony sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Council, expecting to see a species on the verge of extinction, instead witnessed something far worse. A species that refused to die. And this was only the beginning. Humanity had survived the first phase of war. But we weren't fighting for survival anymore. We were fighting for something greater. Something the Council had never imagined. We were fighting for vengeance. We were fighting for justice. And now, we were coming for them. The Council had seen wars before. Brutal conflicts between rival empires, endless border skirmishes, and species-wide exterminations carried out with cold efficiency. But this was different. They had never faced an enemy like humanity. In their arrogance, the Council believed their technological advantage was absolute. Their war doctrines had been refined over millennia. Their fleets had subdued countless rebellions, and their forces had crushed entire civilizations before they could even dream of resistance. But they had never fought a species that evolved through war itself. Humanity was different, not because of our ships, not because of our weapons, but because of something far more terrifying to them. We adapted. The moment the war began, Earth's greatest minds, scientists, strategists, engineers, worked without rest, analyzing every battle, every enemy tactic, every technological flaw in the Council's war machine. Our fleets didn't just fight, they learned. Every battle lost was dissected, every enemy weapon reverse-engineered, every defeat transformed into a lesson. And then, we turned their own power against them. The first major counteroffensive was launched at Xanthus Prime, a heavily fortified world deep within Council space. It was a fortress, a world whose orbital defenses had stood for 10,000 years, a world the Council deemed unassailable. It fell in 6 hours. The attack was surgical. Our cyber warfare units disabled planetary defenses before the Council even knew they were under attack. AI-driven strike craft, equipped with experimental stealth systems, infiltrated their atmosphere undetected. Entire squadrons of enemy warships were hijacked mid-battle, their own systems turned against them. And then came the ground assault. The Council's forces had always relied on sheer numbers and overwhelming firepower to win battles. But against human infantry, they were outmatched in ways they couldn't comprehend. Powered exoskeletons made human soldiers faster, stronger, deadlier. Swarm drones provided real-time battlefield intelligence, giving every soldier perfect situational awareness. Portable railguns shredded enemy armor like paper. And most terrifying of all, we fought with an intensity no other species could match. The Council's forces, warriors who had never known true desperation, broke first. They surrendered, in droves, retreating from a battle they believed was unwinnable. In 6 hours, a planet they thought was untouchable belonged to humanity. It wasn't just a victory. It was a message. But we weren't just winning battles. We were doing something far more dangerous. We were changing the rules of war itself. For centuries, the Council had maintained control through fear, by making sure no species ever dared rise against them. Their military was built on that foundation, designed to suppress rebellions, not fight full-scale wars against an equal opponent. But humanity didn't just resist. We pushed back harder. Every battle became a proving ground for new weapons, new tactics, new innovations. What took the Council centuries to refine, we perfected in days. They fired plasma bolts at our ships. We developed energy absorption shields. They launched kinetic bombardments. We built planetary deflectors that bounced the projectiles back. They deployed biological weapons. We engineered countermeasures before the first spores could take root. They escalated the war. We turned escalation into evolution. For the first time in galactic history, the Council wasn't just losing a war. They were losing control. And that terrified them. The fall of the Grand Fleet. In their desperation, the Council assembled the largest armada in history. A force so massive it darkened the skies of entire planets as it passed. Tens of thousands of warships, pulled from every corner of the galaxy, merged into a single unstoppable force. They would not just defeat humanity. They would erase us. The fleet arrived in Seoul, expecting an easy conquest. Their intelligence reports said Earth was weak, vulnerable, barely recovering from the initial bombardment. Those reports were outdated. The moment the Council fleet entered the system, they realized their mistake. It was a trap. Earth wasn't defenseless. It was a fortress. Hundreds of orbital defense platforms powered up, hidden in asteroid belts, disguised as debris, buried beneath the icy crust of moons. Saturn's rings shimmered for a moment, and then opened fire, revealing railgun emplacements powerful enough to shred entire dreadnoughts in a single shot. Mars, long thought a barren world, became the Council's worst nightmare. Its terraforming efforts had been a cover for something else entirely. A planetary-scale weapons platform. As the Council's fleet moved in, the surface of Mars erupted with missile fire, launching swarms of autonomous strike drones directly into their formations, and then the hidden fleet emerged. The Council expected to fight a desperate, broken humanity. Instead, they faced the most advanced war machine ever assembled. The Battle of Seoul was not a battle, it was a massacre. Council ships, their formations rigid and outdated, were torn apart by human squadrons moving faster than they could track. Their shields, designed to resist conventional energy weapons, failed against human railguns and gravimetric torpedoes. Within hours, the armada that was supposed to end humanity was burning in orbit. Their greatest fleet, gone. Their illusion of superiority shattered. And for the first time, the Council faced a terrifying truth. They weren't fighting for dominance anymore. They were fighting for survival. Humanity had done the impossible. We had turned the tide. But the war wasn't over. The Council still ruled the galaxy, and they would do anything to hold on to that power. But now, they weren't the ones giving ultimatums. We were. The Council's defeat at Seoul sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, the once untouchable rulers of interstellar civilization had suffered a catastrophic, undeniable loss. Entire species, once too terrified to oppose them, watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded. Humanity had beaten them at their own game. But this wasn't just about one battle. This was the beginning of the end for the Council. Their war machine, once seen as invincible, was exposed as outdated and vulnerable. Their fleet doctrine, reliant on overwhelming numbers and brute force, was torn apart by human adaptability. Their psychological warfare, designed to break lesser species into submission, had failed spectacularly against a race that thrived on resistance. But the most devastating blow wasn't military, it was psychological. The Council's entire hold on the galaxy depended on one thing: the illusion of absolute power. The moment that illusion was shattered, their empire began to crack. The uprisings, Begin news of the Battle of Sol spread like wildfire. For centuries, species across the galaxy had suffered under the Council's rule. They had watched their homeworlds stripped of resources, their cultures suppressed, their advancements stolen. Some civilizations had been annexed outright. Others had been kept in a constant state of stagnation, never allowed to rise beyond what the Council deemed acceptable. And now, they saw hope. The first to rise were the Drenari, a reptilian species whose homeworld had been under Council occupation for over 1,000 years. Their people had been turned into a labor force, their warriors forced to serve in the Council's auxiliary armies. But when they heard that humanity had destroyed the Grand Fleet, something changed. Entire Drenari garrisons mutinied overnight. Council warships, once patrolling their worlds with impunity, were suddenly ambushed by their own troops. Centuries of suppressed rage exploded in a storm of rebellion. And they weren't alone. On the mining worlds of Velos 9, the enslaved Zalkir people, an insectoid species considered too primitive for citizenship, rose up in the dead of night, seizing control of the planet's orbital defenses. The Council's security forces, long accustomed to keeping order through intimidation alone, were caught completely off guard. Velos 9 was free within a week. One by one, entire sectors began to fall. Revolts turned into full-scale uprisings turned into revolutions, and through it all, the Council was paralyzed. Their forces were spread thin, desperately trying to contain the chaos. But the more they fought to suppress the rebellions, the more fuel they added to the fire. And at the heart of it all was humanity. We weren't just another rebel faction. We weren't a species fighting for survival. We had become something far more dangerous. We had become the catalyst for galactic revolution. The fall of the core worlds. The Council's high command, once filled with arrogance and certainty, now faced the nightmare scenario they had never prepared. For the war was no longer about stopping humanity. The war was about saving themselves. Desperate, they ordered every remaining fleet to pull back to the core worlds, the heart of their empire, where their most advanced warships, elite soldiers, and greatest strongholds resided. Their strategy was simple. Hold the core at all costs. If they could keep the heart of their empire intact, they believed they could outlast the storm, regain control, rebuild, and crush the rebellion before it spiraled beyond their ability to contain. But there was a fatal flaw in their plan. By abandoning the outer systems, they had handed us the keys to the galaxy, and humanity wasn't about to let that advantage go to waste. The moment their fleets withdrew, we struck. We didn't just take planets. We liberated them. We didn't just overthrow the Council's rule. We replaced it with something better. On every world we freed, we armed the people. We trained them. We shared technology. We gave them the means to fight back. We weren't conquerors. We were builders. The rebellion wasn't just humanity's fight anymore. It was a movement. And with every planet that joined us, our forces grew stronger. By the time we reached the core worlds, humanity wasn't just leading an army. We were leading an entire galaxy. The final stand. The Council had spent thousands of years ruling through fear. Now, they were the ones afraid. Their last remaining fleets formed a desperate defensive line around their homeworld, Prime Taraxis, the capital of the Empire. It was the most heavily defended planet in existence. Massive orbital fortresses, planetary shields, fleets so numerous that they blocked out the stars. They thought it was impenetrable. They thought they could hold the line. They were wrong. We didn't attack the way they expected. We didn't throw our forces at them in some grand battle. We starved them. We used the very tactics they had once used against weaker civilizations. We cut off their supply lines. We jammed their communications. We turned every system around them into hostile territory. For months, they sat in their fortress, waiting for reinforcements that would never come. Their people, once loyal, once obedient, turned against them. And then, when the Council's last fleet was at its weakest, we struck. The final battle wasn't a battle. It was an execution. The Council's greatest warships, their mighty dreadnoughts, their centuries-old strongholds, fell within hours. Their leaders, once untouchable gods of the galaxy, were dragged from their palaces and forced to face the people they had ruled through terror. The empire they had built over millennia was gone. humanity had won. But this wasn't the end. Because now, with the Council fallen, there was one final question left to answer. What comes next? Would humanity rule as they had? Would we seize power for ourselves, replacing one empire with another? Or would we build something better? The fate of the galaxy was in our hands. And the next chapter of history was about to begin. The Council was dead, their fleets shattered, their leaders executed or sent into exile. The galaxy had watched as their empire, a monolithic force that had ruled for thousands of years, collapsed like a dying star. But this was not the end. This was the beginning of something far greater, because even as humanity stood victorious, basking in the ruins of the old order, a new challenge emerged. One far more complex than war, more difficult than any battle we had fought. Now, we had to build. Now, we had to govern. The chaos. After the fall, when the Council fell, so did every system they had controlled. Entire civilizations, once ruled under their iron grip, suddenly found themselves leaderless, lawless, and in disarray. Worlds that had never known freedom before struggled to understand what came next. On the industrial planets of Terra 7, once the lifeblood of the Council's war machine, factory workers who had spent generations under forced labor now found their overseers gone. Some celebrated, some rioted, some turned on each other. On the trade hub of Zelthar Prime, rival factions vied for control over vital hyperspace lanes. Without the Council's presence to maintain order, piracy surged, with former mercenaries and rogue fleet captains carving out their own dominions in the void. And on countless other worlds, old wounds reopened. There were species that had been forced to serve as cannon fodder for the Council's military, who now sought vengeance against those they had once fought beside. There were civilizations that had been kept artificially weak, who now struggled to claim their place in the new order. In the absence of centralized rule, chaos reigned. And it was in that chaos that a new question emerged, one that no one had dared to ask before. What would replace the Council, the Galactic Assembly, humanity's first challenge? We hadn't fought this war to replace one empire with another. Humanity had always been different. We weren't conquerors. We weren't tyrants. We were something else. And so, as the dust settled, we did something no one expected. We called for unity. Representatives from every newly freed world were invited to a gathering unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The First Galactic Assembly. It was held on a neutral planet, Vordros III, a world that had suffered under the Council's rule but had no strategic importance. It was a symbolic choice, a place where no one had power over another. Thousands of species came. Some were leaders of entire civilizations. Others were warlords who had seized power in the chaos. Some came seeking guidance. Others came seeking advantage, and in the heart of it all was humanity. We didn't demand leadership. We didn't claim dominion. Instead, we offered something the galaxy had never seen before: a coalition. A system of governance where no single species ruled, where decisions were made through cooperation, not oppression. It was an idea radical beyond measure, and it was met with resistance. Many species, especially those who had suffered the worst, under the Council, wanted retribution. The Drenari, who had led some of the bloodiest uprisings, demanded the extermination of any species that had willingly served the Council. The Velthari trade guilds refused to acknowledge any form of government, seeking instead to carve out their own economic empire in the vacuum of power. Others feared that the assembly was nothing more than a ploy, that humanity was simply replacing the old rulers with themselves. The debate lasted for weeks. Tensions ran high. Alliances were formed and broken in the same breath. And then, the assassinations began. The Shadow War. Enemies in the Darket started with the murder of High Speaker Valor, one of the few former council members who had supported humanity's vision of unity. He was found in his chambers, throat slit with a monomolecular blade. A message was left behind, written in his own blood: no new rulers. Then came the bombing of the Assembly Hall, where a terrorist group calling themselves the Sons of Vengeance detonated an antimatter charge, killing dozens of delegates. And finally, the ambush on humanity's envoys. A diplomatic fleet carrying Earth's representatives was intercepted in deep space by a rogue faction calling themselves the Imperial Remnant, Council loyalists who had refused to accept defeat. They broadcast a single message before opening fire. The war is not over. It became clear. There were forces in the galaxy that would never accept peace. There were those who thrived in the chaos, and there were those who still feared humanity's rise. This wasn't just a war of guns and warships anymore. This was a war for the soul of the galaxy, humanity's response, the birth of the galactic vanguard. For all our victories, we had made one mistake. We had believed that peace would come easily, that the fall of the Council would mean the end of war. But war does not die so quickly. So we adapted. If the galaxy would not accept peace through diplomacy alone, then we would defend it. Humanity proposed a new force, one that would ensure order without ruling by fear. A unified defense force, made up of warriors from every free world, dedicated to protecting this new, fragile peace from those who sought to destroy it. They would not be conquerors. They would not be enforcers. They would be guardians. The Galactic Vanguard. Their mission was clear. Hunt down the remnants of the old empire. Root out those who sought to destabilize the assembly. Ensure that the darkness of the past never returned. And leading them was humanity's greatest commanders. The same warriors who had once led fleets into battle now led a different kind of war. A war against chaos itself. The future at humanity's fingertips. The road ahead was uncertain. There were still those who resisted unity, who clung to old grudges, who saw the fall of the Council as an opportunity for their own power. There were those who saw humanity as a threat, a species that had shattered the old order and could just as easily become a new tyrant. And then, there were the unknown dangers that lurked beyond the galactic rim. The Council had spent thousands of years keeping their eyes inward, focused on their own dominion. But humanity was different. We had always been explorers. And now, with the Council gone, with the galaxy at our fingertips, there was something else waiting for us, a new frontier, a new mystery, and perhaps something even greater than war. Because for the first time in history, the galaxy belonged to the free. The war had ended, the Council was no more, but the struggle to shape the future had only just begun. With the rise of the Galactic Assembly and the formation of the Galactic Vanguard, humanity had taken its first steps toward creating a new order. One built not on conquest, but on unity. Yet, even as the ashes of the old empire cooled, new threats emerged from the shadows. This was not the story of a single battle. This was the war for the fate of the galaxy itself. The Great Division. Fault lines in the assembly. From the moment the Galactic Assembly was formed, it was fragile. Not every species wanted unity. Not every world believed in peace. And as the debates raged within the halls of the assembly, cracks began to form. The three major factions emerge. The assembly quickly split into three major factions, each with their own vision for the future. The Architects of Order. Led by a coalition of former resistance leaders, the Architects believed that the only way to prevent another empire from rising was through strict governance. They argued that peace could not be maintained without structure, that a strong central authority was necessary to keep the galaxy from falling into chaos. Their solution? A unified galactic government, where all civilizations had representation, but ultimate decisions would be made by a central governing body, the Free Star Coalition. This group, primarily made up of smaller, newly freed civilizations, believed that any centralized government was a path back to tyranny. They pushed for a loose alliance, where each world remained independent but cooperated. On defense and trade, their fear was clear. If one species or faction ever gained too much power, history would repeat itself. The Dominionists. The most controversial faction. The Dominionists were made up of species that had benefited under the Council's rule and still sought power. Some of them openly advocated for a new empire, one that would be more fair, but still ruled by strength rather than diplomacy. Others were more subtle, infiltrating the assembly to undermine its unity, ensuring that no true balance of power could ever be established. the fragile peace between these factions was tenuous at best. But then, the first coup attempt happened. The assassination of General Kaelor, a Velthari war hero and one of the most respected members of the Assembly, had spent months trying to broker peace between the factions. His goal was simple: to prevent another war. But there were those who did not want peace. On the eve of what was supposed to be a historic treaty signing, Kaelor's flagship exploded, in orbit over Vordros III. Thousands died in the blast. The message was clear. Someone wanted war, and war was exactly what they got. The First Assembly War. Civilizations collide. The death of Kaelor ignited the first internal war within the Galactic Assembly. The Architects of Order blamed the Free Star Coalition, believing that radicals within their ranks had sabotaged the peace talks to prevent centralized rule. The Free Star Coalition, in turn, accused the Architects of staging the attack themselves, using Kaelor's death as a justification to seize power. Meanwhile, the Dominionists worked in the shadows, feeding both sides false intelligence, secretly supplying warlords with weapons, and ensuring that neither faction could claim victory. The fighting started in the Rim systems. The industrial world of Zevra 9 fell to an architect-led fleet, forcing its people into submission. The asteroid colonies of the Trelvar Expanse were bombarded by Dominionist mercenaries, disguised as Free Star forces. The shipyards of Kalaris, one of the largest naval production sites, were torn apart in a battle between rival fleets, leaving thousands of ships unfinished and drifting in space. The Assembly, which had once been a beacon of hope, was now at risk of collapsing before it had even truly begun, and the only force standing between total galactic anarchy was humanity. Humanity's gamble. The Iron Pact we had fought to free the galaxy, not to rule it. But now, we faced a choice. We could stay out of the conflict, allow the factions to destroy each other, and emerge as the sole remaining power. Or, we could intervene. It was a decision that split Earth's leadership. Some argued for isolation, believing that humanity had already done enough, and should focus on securing its own borders. But the soldiers, the veterans who had fought to bring the Council down, knew better. If the Assembly fell, the galaxy would descend into endless war. And so, humanity made its choice. We would end the war before it consumed everything. We forged the Iron Pact, an agreement between the most pragmatic members of the Assembly, those who understood that survival meant compromise, not endless war. It was not about ruling, it was about stopping the cycle of destruction. The Iron Pact forces, led by humanity's best strategists, launched a massive campaign of intervention. Operation Eclipse, a precision strike against Dominionist warlords who were fueling the war behind the scenes. The Shadow Purge, covert missions to eliminate infiltrators who had manipulated the Assembly from within. The Siege of Zelther Prime, a brutal but decisive battle that ended the most violent front of the war. After 5 years of conflict, the First Assembly War came to an end, and in its place, a new order was finally established. The New Galactic Order, a hard-fought peace. The war had cost millions of lives. Entire worlds had been scarred. But from the ashes, something stronger emerged. The Galactic Assembly, once fragile, was now tempered by battle. It became a true alliance, not just in name, but in purpose. The Galactic Vanguard was no longer just a defense force. It became an elite peacekeeping organization, capable of stopping threats before they could ignite another war. And humanity, we, had proven that we did not seek dominion. We had proven that we would fight for peace, even when others sought only war. But even as the new order took shape, whispers of a new threat began to spread. Because while we had fought to bring balance to the galaxy, something far older and far more dangerous was awakening in the darkness beyond known space. The true test of humanity's place in the galaxy had yet to come. The war was over, or at least, that's what everyone wanted to believe. The Galactic Assembly had been reforged in fire. The First Assembly War had been won through blood and sacrifice, and humanity had proven itself not just as a warrior race, but as the linchpin holding the galaxy together. But peace is fragile. And in the vast, Emptiness beyond the mapped regions of the cosmos. Something ancient stirred. The battles fought so far, they had only been a prelude to something far greater. The forgotten threat, whispers from the abyss. For centuries, even during the height of the old Galactic Council's power, there had been forbidden sectors, uncharted regions of space where no civilization dared to go. They were not empty, they were avoided. Ancient records spoke of the Vanished, a race so old that even the most advanced civilizations had only fragments of their history. They had ruled the stars before the Council, before even the oldest empires had risen. And then, suddenly, they disappeared. No ruins, no artifacts, only scattered legends remained. Until now. The silent beacon, a signal, no one should have heard it. Started with a deep space anomaly, a listening post in the outer expanse, operated by an independent research group, picked up an impossible signal, one that came from a sector long thought dead. The frequency was ancient, predating any known species. It was coded, encrypted in a way that no one had seen before. But the moment the signal was detected, something changed. Ships in nearby sectors started vanishing. Long-range probes sent to investigate failed to return. Entire planetary systems, ones thought to be uninhabited, began emitting energy signatures as if something had suddenly activated. The Galactic Assembly was hesitant to respond. After all, they had just survived one war. But humanity? We knew better than to ignore a threat in the darkness. The expedition into the Void A task force was assembled, comprised of the best explorers, scientists, and soldiers from the Galactic Vanguard, led by Admiral Elias Voss. The mission? To find the source of the signal, to uncover the truth. But what they found changed everything. As the fleet ventured deeper into uncharted space, they encountered the first derelict megastructure, a massive construct orbiting a dead star. It was a planet-sized station, built from materials no known species could have forged, and within its silent halls they found the first evidence of the Vanished. Or rather, what had become of them, the truth about the Vanished. They had not disappeared. They had been consumed. Inside the station, the Vanguard teams found organic remains, twisted and altered beyond recognition. DNA scans confirmed that these beings had once been highly advanced, but something had rewritten them at the molecular level. Then, they found the records. Buried deep in the station's data core was a warning, left behind by the last survivors of the vanished civilization. It told of an entity, something that did not conquer, did not wage war, but instead assimilated all life it encountered. It did not leave ruins. It did not leave survivors. It left only silence. It was not a species. It was a hunger, and it was waking up. The arrival of the Devourers. The moment the Vanguard retrieved the data, the stars themselves seemed to react. Something had noticed them. It started with a single vessel, appearing without warning. A dark, twisted construct that pulsed with unnatural energy. Then, hundreds more arrived, emerging from the dead void like a tide of darkness. The fleet barely managed to escape, but they had seen enough. The Devourers, what the last of the Vanished had called them, were real, and they were coming. The Galactic Assembly's response, fear, and denial when the fleet returned, battered and broken, they presented their findings to the Galactic Assembly. But instead of unity, the response was panic. Some leaders dismissed the findings as exaggeration. Others believed it was humanity's way of seizing more power. And some, especially among the Dominionist remnants, refused to believe that anything could threaten their carefully rebuilt empires. It was history repeating itself. The Assembly delayed, debated, but humanity did not wait. The last war begins, the battle for survival. As the politicians argued, humanity mobilized. We had seen the warning signs before. When the Council had tried to suppress us, we had fought back. When the Assembly nearly collapsed into civil war, we had held it together. And now, as an existential threat loomed over the entire galaxy, we would not wait for permission to act. Humanity's fleet launched a preemptive strike against the first wave of Devourer vessels. It was a massacre, but not in the way anyone expected. For the first time, the galaxy saw the true power of the Devourers. Their ships were not ships at all. They were living constructs, ever-shifting, ever-changing, adapting with every shot fired against them. Weapons that destroyed one were useless against the next. They did not communicate. They did not surrender. They only advanced. Within a month, entire sectors fell. Worlds burned. The Assembly could no longer deny the truth. The final war for the galaxy had begun. The Iron Shield, humanity's last stand-it, became clear that no single species could stop the Devourers, not humanity, not the Velthari, not the Assembly. The only chance of survival was absolute unity. And so, under humanity's leadership, the Iron Shield Doctrine was enacted. The largest fleet ever assembled was formed, bringing together former enemies, rivals, and allies alike. The greatest scientific minds worked together to develop new weapons, ones that could adapt as quickly as the Devourers did. The Vanguard transformed from a peacekeeping force into the last hope for galactic survival. This was no longer about politics, no longer about power. This was about existence itself, and at the center of it all, humanity. Because we had always been the ones willing to fight when no one else would. And this time, we would not fight for domination. We would fight for everything. But even as the first great battles of this final war began, a terrifying question loomed. Could the Devourers truly be stopped? Or had humanity, for all its victories, only delayed the inevitable? The answer would determine the fate of the galaxy.